today we're going to be cooking Focaccia bread. This is without question my favourite bread, and it's obviously served a lot with Italian meals. A lot easier to do than you would expect, which is why I've decided to do it on here. You can obviously buy the Focaccia bread in the supermarkets, but I do urge you to give it a go. The ingredients, just quickly run through the ingredients. First of all, we've got strong white bread flour. So that's obviously an essential. You can't use ordinary flour. It has to be strong white bread flour. You can get all sorts of different brands, and you can get quite snobby about it in terms of how refined and stone ground it is. I'd definitely encourage that. The next ingredient, I always use fresh yeast. I just like fresh yeast, and we'll have a look at that in a minute. It's a lot easier to get than you might expect. You can buy it in at Sainsbury's at the bread counter. You know, if they've got a fresh bread section in the larger Sainsbury's, you can go and buy that for like next to nothing. Salt, water, and then olive oil and whatever toppings you're going to put on it. We're going to do rosemary and olive oil. So let's start. First thing is to basically flavour some oil. So we're going to get some olive oil, which, by the way, I didn't talk about too much. We should actually talk. This is extra virgin olive oil, which is really nice stuff. You can get good olive oil from Greece, Spain, Italy, but I'd go for the Italian stuff, you know, authenticity-wise. So quite a bit of this, as you can see. And then you've got your rosemary sticks. Now, this stuff, if you buy it in a packet, you know, you can buy it in a packet, it's quite expensive. It's unbelievably easy to grow. And if you wrench it up like that, you break up all the oils, get it right in there, and it will start, basically the oil will start taking on the flavour of the rosemary. And basically, first job you do, and then leave that aside. Okay, so it's going to take a couple of hours to make this, and so if you're having a dinner party and you're going to serve your main course at say 8:30, you might want to be doing this say 5 or 6 o'clock, and try to time the arrival of the bread to come out of the oven, you know, 30 minutes before you're going to eat it, if you can. So I'm going to add, first ingredient is the flour, 450 of the strong white bread flour. Now the yeast. Now the fresh yeast is funny old stuff. It's sort of this crumbly grey, looks a bit like plasticine, and it sort of crumbles flakes. And just put it onto one side, about 15 grams. If you get your camera in there, you can see it's all sort of all crumbled. A little bit more. And for about 20p, you get enough for at least 3 of these. Next ingredient, salt, about 10 ounces. About 10 grams, not 10 ounces, blimey. Now then, if you ever do forget to put this salt in, you will notice it, because it will just taste bland. It's unbelievable the difference it makes. It's not that it makes it salty, it's just that it brings out flavour in the bread. Okay, so that's salt, yeast, a little bit of olive oil. Now I'm just using, at the moment, I'm going to do 2 tablespoons. You could measure this, of course, but I'm just going to judge it roughly. That's about 2 tablespoons. Just goes in there, just ordinary mild olive oil, your everyday. Reset the counter. Now you'll notice I put the salt away from the yeast, just so they don't start fighting, because salt will kill the yeast. And then I'm going to add 400 of water, and that is a lot more than you would usually use for bread. And for this reason, I'm going to use the dough hook on the mixer, because it is a very wet dough. It's actually pretty difficult to knead, because it's not as bad as pancake batter, but it feels like it when you're trying to knead it. So in the machine, switch that on, and that's now going to be kneading away for the next 10 minutes or so. Set the timer for 10 minutes, and we'll come back and see you then. Okay, so we're back with about another minute or so on the timer, and you can see, if you look at the actual bread, the dough, you can see can you see how it's sort of pulling this stringy sort of, that stringiness is the gluten taking its effect. So you can see how wet that is. I mean, that is just a very wet dough, and it's this wet dough that gives focaccia its specific characteristics, unlike a normal bread. So we're going to get lots and lots of weird and wonderful shaped holes in the bread as it rises, as it does its final rise in the roasting pan. So I've got here just a container. You can leave it in there and let it double, no problem. It's easier to judge when it has doubled if you put it into a container which I've greased just with a bit of olive oil, just so it doesn't stick to the sides when we come to take it out. Just because I hate waste, because I know what I want. I want another bit when it's run out. Just press that down. It'll do that itself anyway. Stick a lid on. Doesn't have to be tight, but get a waterproof marker, or rather a non-permanent marker, and then just mark it roughly where it is, and we're looking for that to double. Okay, so that'll take about, depending on the temperature of the room, we don't want to put it in a warm room, we want it to take its time rising, so we don't want to accelerate it. The longer it takes, the stronger the flavour. So it's a compromise between that and obviously it being ready. But that'll take about 45 minutes to an hour, probably an hour. Okay, welcome back. So if we have a look at the dough, you can see that it's now doubled. In truth, that's been about an hour and a half. It's a little bit cooler in the kitchen than it normally is. So we're going to basically be transferring that into the pan, and just to make it a bit easier, I'm just going to line the pan with some greaseproof paper. It just makes it easy. It stops it catching on the bottom, which obviously we don't want. So just line that for the most of that area there. And then when we pour this in, it's going to be extremely sticky. If you try and manipulate this with your hands, it's incredibly sticky, as you saw earlier. So just to make that easier, just get a load of oil on your hands completely, and then it will just come and not stick on your hands, and it will go where we want it to go. It's a dough flying all over the kitchen. So straightening that up, just push it with your oily hands into all the corners, and then we're going to add the rosemary and olive oil. So this has been soaking away, as you saw earlier, from the beginning, a couple of hours, and basically just drench it all over. Quite a lot of oil goes in, and if you're not comfortable with that, I don't know really what to say, but it will all get absorbed. And then with your fingers, just get in there and just use your fingers almost like a crabbing motion, just to make the little holes, continually trying to push it into the corners. So what we'll do is leave that with the tea towel over it in a draft-free place. Again, it doesn't have to be warm. Another hour or so. Let's just check out the bread. It's been second rise for about an hour, another hour and a half, hour and a quarter, I think. So that's now going to go into the oven. Now we've got to be very careful that we don't knock the air out of it. So the oven's been preheating at 220 fan, pretty much as hot as you can get the oven. And we're just going to very delicately, without knocking any air out, stick it in the oven, including not slamming the door, and set the timer for 10 minutes. Let's see how it's doing. It's not done. I can tell it's not done. It's just starting to brown on the edges. So we'll just, it's not long, leave that in for another 3 or 4 minutes. That's better. That's done. We can see that's quite firm on top, looks quite dry, but that'll be sorted out later and then transfer it to the rack just to cool down without breaking into a sweat, and there we go. And then just cut it into portions, really. So just not too big, dinner party, not as big as you might have if it was just you eating at home during the week. That's probably sufficient. Together with a little bit of salt. The flaked sea salt, the Maldon sea salt is really good for this, just get a little hit of the salty flavour. Maybe a few pieces of the like that, and then just stack it up on the board. Bring it to the table. So there we go. I guess the key difference with focaccia bread compared with normal breads is you get these irregular size holes. It's very, it's nice and crunchy on the outside and soft in the middle. And it is quite frankly delicious. Absolutely lovely. And this was the simple one with just rosemary on it, but you could use whatever you fancy really that goes with your main course. So there's some cherry tomatoes dug in, black olives, whatever you fancy.